Hello, my name is Dr. Huong Le Thu, and I was asked to talk about the situation in Vietnam, the political developments in 2020. But let me start with going back a little bit, back to give you a context. So we're here in 2020. It's a very important year for Vietnam for many reasons, which I'll unpack gradually, but how did we get here? It's important to remember that leading to 2020, there into 2019 and even 2018, there have been a series of important events that are still unfolding up until now. And despite all the focus on the ASEAN chairmanship, the chairmanship of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations that Vietnam currently holds, as well as the unfolding pandemic of COVID-19, there are a number of underlying political trends and economic trends and also social trends that will also might resurface during this year. So Vietnam is in this year a very important diplomatic position. As I mentioned before, the chair of ASEAN, a very important year, as well as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for this year, alongside Indonesia. All of that demands a huge amount of diplomatic effort, human resources, as well as political attention to come out of it very well. As you know, external performance is very important for Vietnam, and foreign policy is definitely more important relatively to Vietnam than some of its neighboring countries. And I think overall, Vietnam is performing quite well in regard to being an active chair of ASEAN. Certainly it's not a very easy year to chair. Not just because of the pandemic unfolding, but also the rising tensions with China in the South China Sea, and also issues, ongoing issues like trade and trade negotiations in the picture. But along all those diplomatic challenges, there are also, of course, important domestic issues that also will be absorbing Vietnam for quite some time. And I particularly mean the preparations to the party congress, once in 5 years party congress, in which most of the most important political positions are decided. And that party congress will happen early next year. Usually it's January or the first quarter of the year, because of the many other competing priorities. It might be delayed until maybe April or even more so next year. But there are a series of very, very significant preparations ahead of the Congress, not just the time of the Congress. So you can imagine the stress on the political elites ongoing at the moment in Hanoi. And the issue of domestic politics have been quite an item of attention, given some quite significant waves, undercurrents happening within the political bureau, Politburo, as well as party, but elsewhere wider in the political system as well. If you recall, last year we had a significant period where the party Secretary General, Nguyễn Phú Trọng, who is also currently the president, because under very unusual circumstances that the previous president passed away while at holding the function, Party Secretary General Nguyễn Phú Trọng temporarily consolidated two positions into one, which goes a little bit against the principle of collective leadership in Vietnam, consolidating two of the three most important positions in one person. But the same person, Secretary General Fu Chao fell ill last year, and he was unseen for a little bit while, causing a widespread nervousness as well as question marks in terms of who would be the successor. Now, leading to the party congress early next year, we don't know whether the positions will be continued to be in one person's hand, or it will go back to the regular division into 3 different positions of 3 different persons. So this is unknown. What is also unknown is are there really possible candidates for such succession, because as you know, Party Secretary General Fu Chao is of high age already, and already in the previous party congress, then the age limit was an issue that eventually was overcome, but it was certainly an issue. So there are a lot of questions upcoming to this Congress. There is also a question whether the anti-corruption campaign that Party Secretary General Fu Chao had been leading in the recent years will be continued, and will be continued in that form. You probably have heard of a number of quite high-profile arrests, including abroad, including seizing some suspect from Germany. For example, a lot of them are high or had been high-profile either party members or a high position in party, or a high position in important state-owned enterprises. So it has been in the recent years quite unprecedented level of anti-corruption crackdown. We don't know what will happen to this campaign after the Congress happens. So this is another space to watch. Now, going back to the international environment, which I think is very important and in many ways will affect the domestic politics allocations as well. We've had last year also a number of provocations from China. The Chinese ships had repeatedly trespassed the Vietnamese exclusive economic zone in the South China Sea, and for many times nearing really flaring up tensions. We are seeing currently, as I speak to you, a renewed provocation campaign, both with sinking boats of fishermen, but also, as you might have heard, just this week, China announced new administrative districts, Nansha and Sansha, on Vietnamese also claimed Spratly Islands and Paracel Islands, which Vietnam, of course, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs fiercely and very decisively denounced in a public statement. So far, Vietnam is the only country that have issued decisive denouncement of those provinces and considered them illegal, as well as violating Vietnamese sovereignty on the islands. So the tensions are there. The likelihood that this will continue is pretty high, given also the situation in China and the political motivations of China to continue to take advantage of the crisis situation as the pandemic unfolds and absorbs everybody's attention. But on the note of pandemic, Vietnam has been dealing pretty well with the COVID-19, being able to cap the number of infected to below 300. I think as of today I checked, the active numbers is some 222 cases. Many have recovered, and surprisingly Vietnam has no death recorded up until today, which is great effort, not only because it's international role and regional role of this year, but it's also showing its leadership and governance capacity. And also it's starting to export masks as well as other protective, personal protective equipment, not only to neighboring Asian countries, but also as far as to Europe, the European Union countries, as well as to the United States. So internationally, the Vietnamese reputation obviously is gaining quite a bit thanks to the successful thus far response to the COVID-19. But economically, we don't understand yet the full spectrum of the costs that this pandemic will have on Vietnamese economy. Obviously, the key sectors such as tourism, services, hospitality, even informal economy like food and service providers will be affected. We don't understand the full scope of it yet because we don't know how long the pandemic will last. The longer it lasts, obviously, the bigger impact it will have, and the slower rebounds there will be. But on the aspect of manufacturing, that we already have some indication of how many of what are the cancellation rates of the manufacturing orders. Right now it's around 30% in some industries, which is quite a bit. And I think for the manufacturing industry to rebound will really depend on how Vietnam's major markets will recover from this pandemic. And we're talking about the US, European Union market, Japan, Korea, South Korea, even Australia and China, so and regional neighboring ASEAN countries. So it's of course the chain reaction, and Vietnam will have to get used to a slower growth rate. It's already adjusted its growth predictions. This is a big adjustment. It will be the first time in a long, long time that Vietnam will have a growth rate below 5%, which will request a major, not only mental, but also policy adjustment. And of course, that will affect the agenda of the next party Congress. But so far, if I would to be assessing the performance of the government, especially under Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc, who has been leading in this COVID response operations. It's been pretty positive, and I think his agenda of the fourth industrial revolution is on a good track, although obviously will be to some extent affected by this crisis and disruptions. But counterintuitively, actually, it might lead to fast forward the process of digitalization, and also fast forward the online, moving to online learning, where obviously it's not going to be easy beyond major cities, but it might be very much needed, and then the crisis actually will provide additional motivation. Now, speaking of online, one other issue that really is worth considering here is Vietnam's achievement in 5G network area. So Vietnam has been one of the very few, I think 6 so far countries in the world that have successfully tested and tried their own 5G networks. So the Vietnamese companies Viettel and Mobifone, Vinaphone have in partnership with Ericsson and Nokia, successfully tested the 5G in big cities. And the plan was to roll out later this year and early next year. I don't know what's the update after the COVID disruption, but this is so far quite an achievement, not only from the technological point of view, but also national security point of view. As you all know, the 5G network is in Australia and many Western countries discussed primarily in the context of national security and safety of data. So Vietnam being able to really resist that Huawei ban that the US was pushing, but at the same time not using Huawei and finding the third way, the third pathway, is really quite an achievement and something, a model maybe, that it can further share and expand beyond its own borders. This is a very quick sketch of Vietnam's situation. Obviously, it's hard for me to speak without knowing your particular interests. So I'd be very keen in this later session where we have interactive questions where I can respond to your queries. But to sum up really quickly, I really think Vietnam is at the crossroad. It is a very important year this year, 2020, and it evolves as we speak. Any moment there might be some disruptions and unplanned escalations at the sea, given the scale and intensification of Chinese provocations. It can turn very wrong and in a very bad way. Vietnam obviously would aim at not escalating, but at the same time protecting its own national interest. It has multiple challenges at the same time. While being the chair of ASEAN, it has a stronger voice, obviously, to raise this traditional security concern, but at the same time, it has a pressure to act as a neutral chair. So China has used that argument against Vietnam that it cannot push too hard on the South China Sea issues because some of the member states of ASEAN who don't have claims and have a more accommodating view will oppose that. But I think, but the crisis, COVID crisis that cuts through many levels, health, political, societal, economic, and even geopolitics, will really set Vietnam's course this year and determine its international performance, which, as I said, in turn will have also its effect on its domestic political development. So there's a lot to watch. There's a lot to watch also on individual level or societal level in terms of data privacy, data protection, and data monitoring as of any country, that regardless of the political system. But because Vietnam also had passed not long time ago a quite controversial cyber law, this might resurface again and become a point of contention as well. But there are a lot of big issues to follow, so it's easy for Vietnam to be distracted and for Vietnam watchers to be distracted at any point of time on any particular issues evolving. So I encourage you to keep a close eye on the developments in Vietnam this year in particular. Thank you.